not a fan of the acronyms. If it works for you, then do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm going to tell you that I am not a fan of it. What I do teach is the model that you learned in school. You know, when you took that methods class and you had no idea what it actually even meant. I totally remember, you know, 1,000 years ago sitting in my class going over the methods, and I'm like, what does that mean? Okay. Oh, come on. So then we're always going to assess, which is very much like what any of the acronyms say. Okay. Always. Okay. So safety first. Safety first. Okay. So whether it's my safety, my client's safety, the safety of a child, safety first. So remember, when it comes to those neglect questions, unless they're in imminent danger, we do not call in those neglect. Bobby comes to school and he is disheveled and his hair is dirty and he's hungry and he's got a few bruises on his knee. I'm going to talk to him first. What we do is we provide resources. That's what we do as social workers. So those, I'm not going to call in. I'm going to provide the resources that he needs. If I've already called the mom and she can't do it, then that's a different story. But my goal is to make sure that I'm really going to safety first. Then if the question is high end feelings, I cannot ignore those feelings. If I turn the camera on today and one of you were crying or angry or upset with me, I would just ask you, are you okay? What's going on? I would acknowledge those feelings. If it's high end feelings, you always have to acknowledge. And then, as Maria said, assess. But it is not necessarily the word assess. It is the term. Gather as much information as you can. And those really apply across the board. So when we're looking at this social work model, this most often applies to our vignettes. Okay, so if you've got a family, they're coming in with a problem, that's going to apply to our vignette. However, all of the questions, you're always going to assess unless it's safety first. Okay, whether it's a community question, whether it's a racial diversity question, whether it's you know, anything even other than a code of ethics question, I just want to know more information before I make a decision. Okay, so there are very few interventions on the test. There really are. You're going to find that most of them are at the top when it comes to those assess questions. Okay, again, explore, discuss, gather as much information as you can. Okay. So before I go on, this is the question I talked with someone earlier today. Okay. So this is 105. This is Zach. Zach is a social worker on the HIV AIDS clinic treatment at a large urban hospital. He meets with Saul, an undocumented immigrant from Colombia who is HIV positive. Saul does seasonal work under the table for a landscaper. He has no health insurance and receives no public benefits for himself or his wife and children. Zach would like to help Saul apply for benefits, anticipating that his HIV status may compromise his ability to work in the future. What initial referral would Zach make to help Saul? So this is a diversity question as well as a policy question, knowing what our social work policies are. Okay, so are there some things that people who are not citizens can apply for? Yes. So if you say that question, yes, there are many communities. There are many communities who have a very large migrant population, and they really do provide services. Okay, so I live in a, I'm from South Florida. I'm from Miami. Okay, and in Miami, we had lots of people who we didn't ask about citizenship. That wasn't even an option that we even asked. And there were tons of services applied because we had needy families. And it really didn't matter whether or not you were a citizen or not. Okay, so just know that was kind of what that looked like for us. So there are some things that you can apply for. Okay. So then, with this one, SSI, so again, it's a policy question. In order to apply for Social Security, what do you have to have? Not SSI, but Social Security retirement, Social Security disability. What's the requirement?
You have to have a job.
For how long?
For at least 10 years.
Yes, you have to have at least 10 credits. At least 10 credits, okay? So, and most often Social Security defines that as 10 years, okay? So what you're going to do is really look at, there's a question I've seen, a client comes in, I hear lots of noise in the background. Could everybody mute themselves? Not sure where it's coming from. Just put yourself on mute for me. Okay, so you have to have at least 10 credits to get Social Security. So my husband died. My youngest daughter, gets Social Security, the survivor's benefits. Okay, my husband worked. He worked his whole life, so she gets his benefits. Now, if he had not worked, she wouldn't be able to withdraw anything, because you had to have worked at least 10 years. The SSI is for people who are just poor. So you didn't work enough, and our government does give you enough to get by. So that is my SSI. Okay, Saul doesn't apply for doesn't qualify for Medicaid because he's not a citizen. And nor food stamps or any kind of fuel assistance. Okay, so none of those programs. So he would have to go to an immigration lawyer. However, if Saul's wife, is pregnant and she's pregnant, she's in the United States, his wife would qualify for WIC because she's pregnant. So don't assume because the person is not a citizen that they wouldn't qualify for everything, but definitely the things that are supplied through the federal and the state government, they would not qualify for. So that is both making sure that you understand policy as well as the racial diversity issues. Okay.
Miss Pam, I have a quick question.
Yes, dear.
What did you remember when you were saying about the 10 credits, or SSI says it refers to 10 years? You said that one is, which one is that one? Not SSI, but what is it?
So that would be regular Social Security, either retirement or disability. Okay. So if you have worked your whole life, then, when you go to retire, if you've paid in, you'll get something out. One of the things that we know is that African American older women are the poorest women and when it comes to retirement, because if we look back at my grandmother, the only jobs that were offered to her were, she was a maid and she ironed for other people. Do you think they took out some Social Security for her? No, did not. Okay, so given kind of the history of what it looked like in our country, that many years ago, those weren't options. So to be honest with you, so that's why we still have survivors benefits, because many times back in when this Social Security came out, women didn't work. They didn't work outside the home. So at age 60, you're actually capable of withdrawing your husband's Social Security, because the suggestion was that he was the breadwinner, he would take care of you. So if he died before the age of 60, as long as you don't remarry, then you can still draw his Social Security benefits as well.
And the regular SSI, that correlates to the survivor's benefits one?
Regular SSI is, okay, so
I get them confused.
Regular Social Security, it's okay, thank you. Regular Social Security. So you're going to get back what you've paid in. So for example, if you go on disability, I think the average check now for Social Security disability, if you worked your whole life, you'd probably be bringing in maybe $1,200 or $1,300 a month, maybe more than that, depending on where you are. However, if you didn't put any credits in, if you hadn't worked enough, Social Security SSI, you'd be getting about $600 a month, which is barely enough really for someone to live on. Not even like the $1,200, but if you didn't pay in, you can't get anything out. Make sense?
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Okay. So this often is on the test, not necessarily knowing just knowing the terms. Okay. So the racial identity model, it is in the APGAR book. It just doesn't look this way in APGAR. And I'm not sure what section it is, but definitely it looks it's the same information. Thank you, Maria. Okay, so then, and I think I've been pretty honest with you before, I do know the one of color very well. The others I do not know as well. I'll make sure I put this in the chat box, but I have seen questions regarding development of other racial identities as opposed to people of color. Okay, so pre-encounter, encounter, immersion, internalization. I can tell you what it looked like for my children when it came to the whole racial identity. My children have pretty much grown up in a upper middle class, mainly white neighborhood their whole lives. So when they were 3 and in preschool, everybody being in South Florida, it was a very diverse. So there'd be Hispanics and Asians and kind of more diverse in other parts of the United States. So they didn't recognize that people were different. They just didn't recognize that there were issues of color. They were just kids and they were friends. We lived in the same neighborhood. They got that. The encounter is when something happens. So for my son, when he was probably about, I don't know, maybe 10, 11, older than that, probably 14 or 15, it was cool to hang out at Walmart, after school or after the football games. And what he found sometimes is that the children who did not look like him wouldn't have a hard time, but he was given a hard time sometimes. Okay, so that's an encounter. That's when you realize you're truly not identified as white or part of the majority culture. My daughter, they both of them worked on the other side of town from where I live, and they were told several times, just get on the interstate, don't go through town, and come home. They were young African American children. They both had nice cars and they had a job that gave them cash in their pocket. So I'm trying to explain to them, again, what that might look like. So, but of course, my 16-year-old at the time who knew everything, she kept driving through town. And I'm like, honey. So she would get pulled over. She got pulled over once for not changing lanes. She had a little bitty crack on her windshield that she'd had for probably 3 or 4 years. She'd get pulled over for things like that. And I kept saying, hey babe, that's, it's because you're black, driving while black, and I live in the South. I'm not going to pretend many times is a real issue. So that's their encounter. They realize, hey, wait a minute, I can't do the same things that many of the other people can do. Immersion. So either at that point you decide that you're going to really identify with your own culture. Okay, so that's sometimes just finding out who you are. So with my middle child, again, that's when she began to wear her hair natural and kind of really embrace her heritage. And then internalization is when you really internalize that. This is who you are, and you kind of live the rest of your life based on those. And again, I'll be very honest with you. The people of color is a lot easier for me because that's it. I can relate to that. But I'll put this in your box because I have seen questions on people, white people, as well as biracial people. In general, there are a couple of terms that you'll see. Okay, so my assimilation, it means as similar as. So I am a Chinese young boy that has moved to the United States, begins to backtalk his grandmother. That is assimilation. That means he looks as similar as everyone else in America, the Western culture. So the Asian culture, you would never talk back to your grandmother. That's unheard of. However, because he's as similar as many of his now buddies, that is what we're seeing. Okay, separation. That's when you keep your own culture while withdrawing from the majority of cultures. So separation is what we saw, especially at the turn of the century, and still now, when we have people who came over from other countries, and we had little China and little Italy and all those little things. That's separation. You want to keep your own culture and not be part of the majority culture. I said to you before, I went to school in Miami, and I used to have one of my professors who would say "up in America," because it really was. Spanish was the main language. You didn't have to learn English. There were signs that were written in Spanish, and it just pretty much was so you didn't have to assimilate or acculturate. The term acculturate means you're going to add a culture to your current culture. So acculturation is when I am kind of making sure that I keep some of my heritage, but I'm adding a different culture to mine. Okay. Marginalization, that is when you don't accept the new culture, or you haven't accepted the old culture. You haven't given up, you haven't adopted the new culture, and you don't have your own culture either. Okay. So I'm going to use, I like this one already, guys, though, Social Work Exam Services. This is an older edition, but it's really just great just in general with some questions and some information. So we are going to talk about our culturally competent practice. Just in general, a couple of questions. So then what is the difference between prejudice and discrimination?
Prejudice is the actual behavior or the act of not liking a certain race or culture, and discrimination, when it's illegal, and like from how I remember it, is like, to me it's like generational. Like if one generation is doesn't like another culture, it goes on and on and on and on. I don't know if that's right, but that's how I remember.
So, I mean, that can be. So prejudice are, you know, I don't like someone based on their skin color, based on their way their name sounds, any of those things. So racism is when I don't like you because of the color of your skin. Because remember, we only have 3 different races, right? Black, white, and Asian. Okay, so everything else is an ethnicity or a culture. So I may not like you because you're an ethnicity, but if I say I'm racist, that's racism. It's really truly based just on the color of your skin. Okay, and then again, like you said, prejudice is against the law. We cannot not rent to someone. We cannot not hire someone based on their, not only their skin color, but also their sexual orientation. All those things have to do with, you know, discrimination. Okay. Don't forget, when it comes to looking at the issues of racial and cultural issues, that we also have to make sure of the diversity, not to forget to leave out the gay and lesbian, the LGBT population. So what's the term gender dysphoria? What does that mean? Gender dysphoria is actually in the DSM, and what it means, so euphoria is happy, right? If I'm euphoric, I'm extremely happy. So dysphoria means that I am unhappy. So gender dysphoria is I do not believe that I was assigned the right sex at birth. Okay, so while I may have a penis or a vagina, I believe that sexual assignment is incorrect. That I feel like I was born a female in a male body or a male in a female body. So that's gender dysphoria. Okay, so then when it looks to when we look at having the surgery and making the changes, so my gender assignment, so if I have had the reassignment surgery, what is that one? Someone just came in. If you could mute yourself for me when you come in.
It's a gender assignment surgery. I think it means that if you were a female and you wanted to be a male, then you had a surgery and became a male.
Okay, so one is transgender, one is transsexual. What's the difference? Transgender is prior to having the surgery.
Okay.
So I am living as a male, identify as a male, okay, and so then I am transgender. Once I have the sexual reassignment surgery, then I am transsexual. Okay, so exactly, my transgender, I'm dressing as the sex, the role that I believed I was assigned to. Now remember, transgender, transsexual has nothing to do with your sexual orientation. Your sexual orientation is then who you are attracted to. Okay, so my gender is, what I have between my legs. My gender assignment is if I believe that I was assigned the wrong sex at birth. And then if I am looking to make that change, prior to making the change, I am transgender. After that, I am transsexual. Just some information, like in the city I live in, excuse me, you are not allowed to, you cannot change your driver's license or your birth certificate from the city that you were, what you were born into. So if you were born a male, you cannot, even if you have the surgery, my state will not allow you to put on your driver's license that you are female. So that certainly, each state is different. I do live in the South, but just know that's the rule in my area. Okay, but again, nothing to do with sexual orientation. My sexual orientation is who I sleep with. So if I were a female, born a female at birth, and then I had surgery and I ended up being a male, okay, so I'm transsexual now. And if I'm a male and I sleep with other men, then I'm still considered homosexual. It doesn't matter what I used to be, it's what I am now. Okay, so then if I am male, identify as male, and I sleep with women, then I'm still considered heterosexual. Okay, so some of those terms will be on there, so just making sure that you understand those. Okay, look at question 2. The positive cultural value that is expressed in the ideals of machismo. And I'm pretty sure that I have some native Spanish speakers, and that is not how it's often pronounced, but I will give it my best. So, that is correct. Rosa, do you want to share that, or do you want to talk about it? What does it look? Is that something in your family that you espouse?
Well, in my family, the man is head of the household. Mm-hmm. My dad was like, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think we can all hear you, yeah.
My dad was like, that was the top notch in the house. Nobody can go over dad. Whatever dad said, that ruled. Because he was the one that made the decisions when it came to protecting, to providing.
Exactly.
Dad did a whole lot that is not seen nowadays. Mm-hmm. It's not kind of the tradition anymore. But culturally, the man is like the highest authority in the household.
And thank you. So like I said, we lived in South Florida, and having, a very large Hispanic population. I mean, even, up until probably 5 or 6 years ago, it was not uncommon for, one of my kids to ask, someone to sleep over or to do something, and they had to ask dad. So but it's not a macho and everything, I make the rules. It is, I make the rules because I'm responsible. Because if something happens to my children, it really is about, or my wife or my family, it's on me. So it's not this negative connotation of, we can't make any decision, but it's making sure that you understand that because his job is to protect the family. So you may have a conference, a family conference with a mom, and you spent, a couple of hours talking to them, and mom is not going to make a decision until she runs it by her husband. And again, it's not a matter of seeing it from our Western viewpoint that she's somehow less than or subservient, but the rule is that he is responsible, and he will, if he makes the wrong decision, he'll take care of it. Okay.
And another thing that's mistaken for machismo, white beaters, nope. My dad was the best. He was the gentlest. None of that. It has nothing to do with beating the wife and children.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for sharing. Okay. In general, also, I'm sure you're seeing the question, what is the fastest growing population? And the fastest growing population really is the are Hispanics, the babies born, born in America that are of Hispanic heritage. Does anybody know why? Why that's the largest? By 2050, it's supposed to be like the largest population in the United States.
In Hispanic families, children are seen as blessings. The more children you have, the more blessed you are.
So most Americans, us good old Westerners, we want the big old house with 2.5 kids. Many of our Hispanic families, the blessing is having the small house with all the children. And so many of our Hispanic families are Catholic and do practice the rhythm method. That's a blessing. That is a blessing. So as while we would see as, oh my gosh, how can I afford to take care of those children? That is not how it is seen by the Hispanic population. Okay. So look at number, what was that one? Number 3. The positive culture of, so when an interpreter is needed to conduct a social work interview, the least appropriate person would be, okay, so then how come? Oh, I've got some different answers here. I like that. I was speaking to someone the other day about this class, and many times group think is happening. And if you don't remember, group think is when you kind of go along with the group so you don't rock the boat. So sometimes someone may feel like they have the right answer, but they're afraid to share because the other members of the class didn't agree. So that is group think in real life and what it actually looks like. Okay. So what about that agency staff member? What's wrong with that one? And then that's what usually happens, right? We go get the janitor, the custodian, we get someone to come over and, translate for us. What's the problem with that one? Remember, in general, so if someone is translating, whether it's a language or whether it is an interpreter, you are looking at the client, okay? You're not speaking to the interpreter. You're really talking to the client, okay? So then I've seen the question about what should it look like? So the interpreter should be beside you, and then so you're looking at the client. So then you're talking straight ahead, making eye contact, not looking at the interpreter. And then you are making sure then that so she's interpreting what you're saying. Okay. And yes, the answer is the same for ASL. It sure is. Exactly. So whether it's a language interpretation or whether it is the ASL, you're absolutely right. Okay. And of course, the child of a client, especially we just talked about machismo and understanding the hierarchy. Imagine if you had to talk to someone and your child had to translate. American families, Western families, no different than Hispanic families. There are some things we don't discuss with our children. We don't share that with our children. And suddenly now you're asking a child to play a grown-up role. Imagine how that would, emasculate a man or even, a female. That's like, whoa, I'm the adult here. Okay. There's a hotline that many agencies with money use if you can't hire someone. But so the court system uses it and the hospitals are supposed to use it as well. And it really is kind of a hotline where you call, it's on speakerphone, and they will translate almost every language. Okay. Look at 4. I think that's interesting. Empirical research on diagnostic patterns has historically demonstrated that African American clients with the same symptoms, the same symptom presentation as white clients will often be misdiagnosed. So, how often does that happen? Be brave, guys. Be brave. Too often? Well, okay. I need a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So pick a number. Yeah, thank you. No writing in the answers on this one. Okay, definitely more severe. What we really know is that African Americans are more likely to be diagnosed schizophrenic as opposed to non-African Americans. Okay, so yeah, you got it. You got it.
What was the correct answer?
The correct answer was more often, more severe.
More often. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Look at number 9 there. That's a community as well as a diversity question. Oops, sorry. Go back to that one. Number 9. Come on, be brave. I'll have a 2. That's all I get today, guys. Okay, so the Community Health Service has difficulty attracting undocumented local residents for services that they clearly need. Many are afraid that the staff will report them to the INS and resulting in their deportation. Concerned with rampant communicable diseases, the center has changed the social service department with coming up with a solution that brings patients to the center. The strategy has the greatest chance of success. Okay, so as we look at this question, so we're looking at undocumented aliens. I hate that word. Undocumented citizens. They're not aliens, so people who are undocumented. Okay. And they're afraid. And this is very true now. Many times our people are afraid to go to the hospital. Some of the clients know that, something as simple as a speeding ticket can get them deported. I live in an area where there was a man who was ticketed for driving too slow. And believe it or not, our area, which is still very southern, the policeman, the sheriff really, according to the newspaper, he tried very hard to not have him deported. INS or ICE came in and made that decision. But most of the clients are very aware of that, so they're extremely law-abiding, not wanting to take any chances to get sent back and leave their families here. Okay, so advertising local ethnic newspapers. Okay, hire local Latino residents to visit the members. That is the better choice. Okay. So then it's a communicable disease. So my first thought, of course, now we think of COVID, but prior to that, we always thought of like AIDS or something that was very communicable. So we want to make sure that we're keeping the population safe. So you got it. You got it. Okay. Good, good, good. Thanks. Okay. Look at number 10. Oops. There we go. The mental health agency learns that a local landlord refuses to rent apartments to African Americans. The board decides to take an action on behalf of several clients who've been refused housing. The best strategy is to what? Okay, a best question to me always reminds me there's more than one right answer. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to look and figure out what is the best right answer. Okay, I got a 1. Anybody else? Come on, guys. Be brave. Be brave. I hadn't bitten anybody this week. Okay, so it is illegal, and that's the point of that. We talked earlier about discrimination. It is illegal, so that makes it 1. Okay, so using the existing laws, it's just illegal. You cannot do that. Good, 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 guys. Thanks. 11. The 2 concepts that address cultural universal and cultural specific are what? Okay, so on number 11, so what is that answer of these terms? Okay, auto versus allo. If you're not familiar with these terms, let me go over some things. I think we all know the nature versus nurture, right? Whether I was born with it or whether I was reared with it, right? That's my nature versus nurture. Autoplasy versus alloplasy talks about our area of control. Okay, so autoplasy are things that I have control over. Alloplasy, put that up again. This one. Use this one. That mouse is dying. Okay, so alloplasy has to do with the environment. So a client tells you that I struggle with English. I've only been here a few years in this country, and it is I can't get a job because of they won't hire me. That's alloplasy. That's outside of my realm of control. Okay, so autoplasy is that's the internal belief. Okay, so if I studied for a test and I didn't pass the test, then if I take ownership, I should have studied more. That's autoplasty. I think what most often happens, and you'll see it on their Facebook page that says, that test is so hard. It was rigged against me. All those things. Okay, so that is my alloplasy. Okay. So alloplasy is outside. Autoplasy are the things that I have control of. Okay. So then, let's go back to that question. Okay. So nature versus nurture, we know that one. That's whether I was born with it. Okay. And then micro versus macro. Micro is what? That's that Braun from Bremer, that eco map thing, remember? Okay, so my Braun from Bremer is my macro, my meso, and the smaller system is my micro. You got it. Meso, that looks at my families. Exo, macro, and it's actually a corona system as well. That's the bigger thing. So that's the Braun van Bremer model, and that's where he also came up with the eco map. So remember you were back in school and that mean professor made you learn the eco map? Macro is the whole. Macro is, so if we talk about macro social work, those are the questions that you most often hate. Those are my indirect practices. Those are the ones that looks at changing the bigger picture as opposed to just working with that one individual client. And in general, the longer you're in the field, you'll find that you're doing a lot more macro practice than you wanted to. Okay. So my Braun-Bremer, the ecological system, that is where I came up with my eco map. And which is different than my genogram. My genogram is the heritage I'm passing down. Okay, so that's, things I learned from my grandmother, my mother, all those things. That's my genogram. Talks about generational transmissions, words like differentiation, emotional cutoff. Those all belong to the genogram, which is Murray Bowen. The eco map, you'll see it uses those same lines. The squiggler of the lines lets you know the more all the other issues that are happening between. So a good straight line means it's a great relationship. If it's dotted, it means that the relationship is not so great. Okay. So all of those things. Oh, somebody needs to mute themselves when you come back in. Please, please, please mute yourself. Gotcha. Okay. Yes, stronger lines. Yes, and actually, if you remember back in school, like the green lines were good, the red lines were bad, and the blue lines meant domestic violence or some kind of violence. Okay, so the answer to that question is etic versus immick. Okay, who's brave enough to tell me what those are?
I can take a guess. I think immick does with like the language of like your family or like the social component, versus etic deals with the actual sociological behaviors and culture throughout your family.
Okay, so you're right about how we view things. However, it's not a family approach.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but you're right on target there. It's just not a family approach. You want to try again?
So I guess etic is more of like I'll just be reading off your thing.
Like I said, do you want to try again? Go ahead. I'm trying to give you some hints there.
Okay. Etic is more of the psychological theories across the cultures, and immick is on one culture and looks at their behaviors. I was right a little bit.
Okay. Yes, you were. Okay. So the one immick is seeing the world from a very specifically, a culturally specific viewpoint. Okay. Etic is I'm seeing a universal approach. Okay. So we always want to take an immick view to understand how the clients see it from their viewpoint. And so of course, it's the easiest thing to always talk about now is COVID, of course. So when China was first hit with COVID, we took a very etic view. It was them. If those Chinese would just wash their hands, this wouldn't happen. We weren't able to see it from an immick viewpoint. We just saw it as them over there doing that. Suddenly, when COVID becomes part of our family, then we have an immick viewpoint. We're able to see it from our viewpoint. Okay. Another example is, again, with COVID. So if I've had you before, probably the last few weeks, we've talked about the Native American population. And the Native American population, many of the people that still live on reservations are still the poorest in our nation. They really are very poor. So much of the income comes from casinos. And if you live in the north, it's maybe different, but in the other parts of the country, casinos are only on reservations. So then COVID hit and all our casinos closed down. So to understand poverty from the viewpoint of our Native Americans, that is very much an immick viewpoint. An etic viewpoint is COVID was hard for everybody. That's true, right? COVID is hard for everybody, but it's definitely harder for people who are people who are already in poverty. Okay, so that's immick versus etic. So immick is what I want to do is I want to have a viewpoint that is from the client's point of view, and etic not the universal viewpoint. Okay, Another term is cultural encapsulation. You know what that one means? Well, sure we do, Pam. Thank you. I always think of a capsule, a Tylenol capsule. That's the best way that I can think about it. So cultural encapsulation means that I am not able to see it from any other viewpoint than literally in my little kind of the bubble I look through. Let me get in there. Okay, so encapsulation means when there were, and it's still going on in many parts of the area. Okay, so when there were the marches were going on, and there are people who are going, I don't understand why those people are march. I don't understand why they vote, do things that way. Okay, that is because you're in your little bubble and you can only see the world from, your penthouse suite looking down. Okay. So if we look outside of our viewpoint, that takes me then to what I want is an immick viewpoint, to really understand from the client's point of view. Okay, so if a client comes in, and you'll see many of those questions. So if a client comes in and they have a question about the diversity or if you're a different race than the client, and they say they're uncomfortable, the answer for the quest is not to prove to them, how much you know about that culture. The answer is to come from their viewpoint. So from their viewpoint, if they're feeling uncomfortable because of the racial or the ethnic or the sexual orientation difference, then I need to talk about it from their viewpoint. Okay, so that's again, I'm taking an immick approach. Okay. Feel free to ask me questions, guys. I don't mind at all. So the answer to 11 was 3. Etic and immick. Okay, well, we're talking about this one. Just a reminder, so when you have a client who comes, when there's questions about people, and they'll bring up the race questions all the time, or ethnicity questions. So if they are clearly breaking American Western laws, that is still something I call child abuse for. Okay, a family who is of Hispanic heritage, they believe in corporal punishment, and they've spanked their child several times, leaving marks. That is not going to change. That is still going to be something I have to call in. That's just the way it is. Okay. So then, just remember those questions. One of the things I've seen on the questions is an Asian family comes in, and the Asian person has the child has marks on their thighs and their legs, not bruises, just kind of red marks. Anybody know what that one is? Okay, it's done now by all the celebrities. Okay, but it's called cupping. Okay, so I've seen the question that an Asian child comes in and he has got, he's been sick, and he's got marks, red marks on his back and his thighs. Okay, that is not one that I'm going to call in. I'm going to just gather as much information as I can. Okay, so I need to ask just a few more questions to figure out what's going on. Okay. When the question talks about if they bring up the race, there's a reason for it. Okay, so make sure that you look at that and you understand there's a reason behind that. So number 7, which Latino nationality lives listed below speaks Spanish, their first language, can work in on such that a green card, and can freely enter and leave the continental U.S. at all times? That is Puerto Rico. That is part of the United States. Okay, part of the United States. Okay, you got it. Number 8. That is Santeria. Okay, so living in South Florida, it is very common that if there were something, so let me back up. So Santeria is kind of a mixture of so we start with off. It's not voodoo because everybody's got it's voodoo. So it is very common in my oops, what was that one? Very common in my Caribbean countries. Okay. Okay. But it's not witchcraft. It's not voodoo. Any of those things. Okay. But yes, it's African beliefs and Catholicism. Being from the Miami area, oftentimes, if there was something going on, especially at the courthouse, and there was a trial going on, one of the things we would see is sometimes the chicken blood in front of the stairs. And that wasn't to curse, that was to bless kind of what was going to happen in that trial. So that is Santeria. And all of my Spanish-speaking people, don't make fun of my accent. Thank you. Look at 24. Two ethnic groups who are least likely to trust and make use of Western health and social services are who? Which two ethnic groups? Remember, ethnic group is not a race. It's my ethnicity. Okay, it is 3. Latinos and Hmong. The Hmong population is around Vietnam, that part of Asia. Okay, so yes. So it's amazing that many of those things that we viewed as not correct, not right, now we've chosen to. Okay, so we have yoga, and we do the cupping, like I said, and a lot of the herbal medicines, things like that come from our Native American populations, that come from our Asian populations, that we now hold on to. You go into GNC now, the general nutrition store, and they're expensive. And many times before, many of our Western populations, like, oh, we don't buy that. We need to go to the store and get the prescription. Okay. Look at number 25. That's an interesting one as well. So to encourage reluctant patients from third world countries to adopt Western health methods and reject unhelpful traditional medical practices, the social worker should first of all, I'm pretty sure that question in itself has a lot of bias in it. Okay, but who do I need to convince first? You got it. I'm going to convince the older family members. Exactly. Okay. So really it's important that the older family members are very, very much respected. In general, a lot of the things we hear about the Chinese population, being very smart and all of those things, just some background history on that. It is not that I'm not going to say they're smarter than other populations. I'll tell you that education is just much more important. So in Asia, in China, it is still very much a communist country. So children from very, very young know that the government decides whether or not they get into college. You can't buy your way in. That's just not even an option. So from day one, they are taught very, very early that if you want to, make something of yourself, if you want to do anything, you have to get into college. It starts at high school. In high school, you're still at that point, even you have to apply to get into high school. and you have to have the scores, and you can imagine how competitive it is. And then once you've graduated or finished high school, then you choose what you'd like to major in, but then the government will decide where you go to school. And college is free. It is free. But they'll tell you where you're going to go to school, which may be on the other side of the country from where your parents live. But you're not going to turn that down, because if you don't, then there are other choices. There's no community college. There's no come back a few years later. Those are just not options. So while, yes, our Asian population, especially our Chinese, do place a high value on education, there's a rationale behind that. Okay, here, if you don't get in the top choice, you get in your second choice. And everyone can go to community college, right? That's not the case in other countries. Okay. Culturally bound syndromes, we've mentioned those a couple of times. Those are the syndromes that are really just based on your culture. And usually I'll see one of those. Okay. I think I've said to you before that one of the ones you'll see a lot is brain fatigue. Okay. So my culturally bound syndromes are things that we would see in the United States, but based on the client's culture. So brain fag, which you'll see often, is literally brain fatigue. It comes from our Nigerian, our West African population. And what we know is that actually in the United States, the largest holder of PhDs are Nigerians. So to them, education is just as important as it would be to the Asian population. So very important. So brain fag is just, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from studying. I put in all these hours. I've done all these things for school. So that is brain. It's called brain fog. Okay. And it really is just a matter of, just I'm exhausted. My brain is exhausted. Okay. You might see DAT syndrome. I like DAT. DAT you see sometimes in my South Asia countries. That is where a man can't get an erection, and he really feels like that it is due to a pee being caught in his semen. Okay, so he can't get erection or he can't ejaculate. Okay, running amok. Okay, that one I always think of a chicken with its head cut off. I don't know why that makes me think that, but I grew up where my papa would break the chicken's neck and then run around for a little bit. So that's kind of running amok. Okay, you'll see a couple of these on there. There was a question. Does it mimic anxiety disorder? It's more of an exhaustion. Really just an exhaustion, just a mental, physical, I just can't, I'm done. And again, because school is so important, many of our clients will spend hours and hours and hours studying with very few hours of sleep. So it really is a physical exhaustion. The root work, come on, I hit you with the root. Okay, that's a common you'll see in my Caribbean countries. Okay, you'll usually see one or two of these, and you'll know it'll say a client from this country is experiencing these syndromes. So the goal is just to remember that those are culturally bound syndromes. Okay, so look at 29. And that one is 3. Got it. My Southeast Asians. Very good. Very good. Okay. Look at this one. That's 33. Look at that one. A positive negative countertransference response when the practitioner is of the same ethnic group as the client is a tendency of what? What's that called? So it's a positive, but it's a negative countertransference. That means that there's some negative feelings there. Okay, when the client is of the same ethnicity as the provider. Again, very good. That's over-identification. So really what that looks like many times is, especially in our lower socioeconomic status families, you know what? I brought myself up. How come you didn't? Okay. So I did this. How come you didn't survive? Also, one of the things that you'll see is that the group, let me try that back. So the one group that would prefer to not see their own, someone of their own ethnicity are my Asian population. So the Asian population, one of the terms you'll see is saving face, not being embarrassed. Asian populations are very much of a collectivistic. That means that we one of us represents all of us. Okay, and it's very important to keep face, to that outward appearance that we're fine. It's very important. So someone in the Asian community would not want to see someone who understood that concept of saving face. So I'm sharing, my brokenness and all that good stuff. That would not be okay with someone who understood what that meant. Okay. Okay, guys, I'm going to do one more question. Do you have any questions for me in general as we're going over these? Look at number 43. An elderly Chinese woman who is a recent immigrant requires surgery followed by 6 weeks in a rehabilitation facility. She is unwilling to undergo surgery if she cannot return home to her family quickly. Her physician fears that the rehabilitation program may not be manageable for the family and refers them to the hospital social service department. The social worker's best strategy in addressing the problem is to what? So this is a cultural question. What I'm looking at is making sure I understand that I just mentioned that Chinese families it's very much a pluralistic, a collectivist society. Okay. Most Americans are individualistic. We are, you can stay for a few minutes, but you cannot live here. And other populations are just not like that. Okay. So then the answer to 43 would be 2. You got it. Discuss alternatives with the physician and the family because of the Chinese cultural norms remind that they have to be cared for at home. So, and even now, if you ever worked in a nursing home, and I think I have a couple people now who work in assisted living or nursing homes, you will find that there are not a lot of people of color, whether it's Black, brown, Asian. There's just some of those things that families just don't do. So especially in an Asian family, you just would not put your mother in a nursing home. That would not be acceptable. Okay. Okay, guys, I got to wrap you up.
Pam, I had one quick question. It doesn't have to do with this. It's about that family level, about the bell curve. When it's skewed, this is the way I understand it. Like, if it's to the left, the mode's on top and the mean's underneath, and it's negative.
You got it. So the mode is always going to be the highest. Always, always, always. Because the mode has the most, right?
Right.
The most numbers. So then if the mean is to the left, that's a negative skew with a negative tail. So what I was going to ask you is, if the mode is, 60 and the mean is 40, that is going to be a negative skew, right? Because it's lower than the mode. If it's higher than the mode is 60, the mean is 80, it's higher than the mode.
Okay, and then there was something in there about the something it couldn't be lower than a 70. Like
that is my correlation coefficient. Okay. So then the correlation is just the relationship between two items, two test items, two variables. So my correlation is if let's say the SAT and the ACT, right? So those are both pretty accurate tests, about the same. So they have a correlation, I think, of like 0.95, because -1 or +1 is the highest. So then if I do well on my ACT, I'll do well on my SAT. That's a positive correlation. Coefficient is the number, correlation is the relationship. So then if I do bad on my SAT, then I'm going to do bad on my ACT. That's a negative correlation, but either way, it's still a relationship. The lowest thing that I'll accept is a 0.70. Okay. Anything below that is not enough for me to accept that as a relationship, a correlation. Okay. Quantitative scores are cause and effect, the quantity. Qualitative, your experience, your feelings, those are always going to be then correlation. So cause and effect, quantitative. Correlation is going to be then qualitative, the quality. When you hang up from AT&T or whatever your phone company is, can you please take a 3 question survey, because they're looking at the correlation. Did you enjoy the experience you got today?
You have a lot of those.
Yeah, but you're going to get about 4 or 5, research questions, and for those of you who have been really close, just knowing some of that simple things will get you over. It really will. Okay, so talk to me about. I just want to be in your pocket. I can't be in your head, but I can definitely. I just want to be in your head. I can't be in your pocket. Okay, but so let's look at. I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, nominal, ratio, interval, and nominal, ratio, interval, and
numbers.
Yes. What are those? My nominal is, those are measurement, means of measurement. My nominal is categories. Okay, the categories I'm looking at. My interval is time. So interval is always going to be the same. Like my time, my clock, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or like my thermometer, it's always got the same. Okay, that's an interval. Intervals have no true zeros. The ratio is the only one that has a true zero. Okay, so that is 3 to 1, 4 to 1. That's my ratio. Okay, what I leave off? Nominal, ordinal. Ordinal is my order. First, second, third, fourth.
Yeah, that's just like regular numbers.
Mm-hmm. Right? But in order. First,
order.
Yeah. Okay. How about population size and sampling? So I'm going to do, if I want to do random sampling, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get just whoever's there, right? Just whoever happens to be in front of the Walmart that day. If I'm doing systematic sampling, I've got a system. Every third person, every fourth person, whatever I need, that's what I'm looking for. Now, I may be looking for stratified. Those are categories, right? Okay. Right. And then after that, I may be looking for proportional stratification. So proportional stratification makes sure that the numbers match what I'm looking for. So let's say I'm looking to, I've got a college and I'm doing a research population that are my college students. Okay, so if my college is, 40% Hispanic and it's 30% Black and 20% other, whatever. So then I need to make sure I get 4 Hispanic students, 2 white students, 3 Black students, whatever I need to match the population. Okay. Linda's testing tomorrow, guys. I'm just going over some stuff. You're more than welcome to listen. I'm spewing information. Okay. So so anyway, so that's proportional though, right? Because what I really want is I want my survey to match the portion of the people that I'm looking for. Okay, so that's also a community question. So when I'm looking at community, remember there's power in numbers. Okay, so then if I live in a community that is like 60% white, and I do a survey, okay, and I get a regular survey, I'm not going to get the voice of everyone in the community because the majority is going to win. And in the community, I don't want that. I'm fighting for the underdog, so I'll use and make sure it's proportional. Okay, so everybody gets a seat, not just one person or two people. Everyone gets a seat at the table instead of going by majority.
Okay.
Okay. What else?
See, I think I'm still having a little trouble with that one defense mechanism of interjection and identification. That one I was talking about the other day.
Identification is if I tell you that my name is Dr. Pamela Turner, and every time I see you, I say, call me Dr. Pamela Turner.
That's right.
Just call me. I don't exist. Just call me Doctor. You know. So I usually call me Bam. You know what? I don't identify with my career. So identification are people who are totally identify with whatever. I'll be honest with you. When my kids were little, I was only known as like their mom. So yes, my identification was, you know, I've Sierra, Savannah, and DJ. That's Savannah's mom. That's Sierra's mom. So that's how I identified, and that's how I saw myself as the mom. Okay, so that's identification. Introjection is the opposite of projection. Projection is when I've got my feelings, okay, and I am like spitting it out. That's projection. Introjection is then I'm thinking you think this way about me, so I'm taking it in. I'm taking it in. That's introjection.
Okay, and the one where, like, if your child says to you, "Oh, I want to be a social worker," and that's because the mom
they're stupid. I'm not recording. I'm sorry. What's the rest of that question? I'm sorry.
Now, is that a defense mechanism there?
Say again.
When the child says, "I want to be a social worker," and you know they're saying because you're one, or you think they are anyway.
So a defense mechanisms are mostly for adults. Okay. Oh, I am still recording. No, I'm not. I stopped. Oh, I didn't stop. Thank you.